Welcome back to Adventures of a Black Belt Sommelier, now sponsored by Four Paws Restaurant in St. Paul, Minnesota, the iconic fine dining restaurant in St. Paul, in a beautifully converted, restored uh, mansion that was built in 1870 with wonderful food, excellent service, and I hope great wine service because I am the sommelier there now. Uh, this is one of those stories that you are going to think is I made up. But as a good friend of mine occasionally says, Hoyt, if half your stories are true, you've lived the most interesting life of anybody I know. And I am not creative enough to have invented this story. Every word of this story is true. Um, During my time at West Point, that's the football stadium behind me. Um, I realized early on that if I got involved in sports, that I could avoid marching in the afternoon. So I was on the varsity wrestling team. I wasn't particularly a great wrestler, but I was on the bar, and I wrestled my freshman year because I was little back then, small back then. Um, and then I volunteered to be one of the student managers of the football team, which was great. Both things were great. So I was pretty much year round, didn't have to march in the afternoon. I also got to sit at the training tables where the food was even more amazing than the food served to everybody else, all the other cadets. The food at West Point, at least when I was there, was incredible. But the food for the varsity athletes was really, really incredible. You burned so many calories, they had to feed you a lot so you didn't just waste away. Now, I have to tell you, everything I'm saying about this is from my time there. I'm not sure it would really be accurate applied to West Point today because there are now women there. Um, so I think in a lot of ways, life as a cadet at West Point has changed since I was there, but this is my experience. Um, it's impossible to overstate the importance of the football team's success in the life of a cadet at West Point. It's like the only thing that matters in life during football season. If the football team wins, life is great, especially the life of the plebes or freshmen who are otherwise treated horribly by the upperclassmen. And if the football team loses, they're treated even more horribly. If football team wins, they are treated a little bit less horribly. What's called hazing. I'm not sure hazing exists anymore. I think maybe it doesn't, but at the time, hazing was pretty rough. And and if the football team won, the hazing eased up a little bit for a couple of weeks because the upperclassmen were really happy. Um, Especially the Army Navy game. This was the only thing that mattered in the lives of the Corps of Cadets. Um, if you can imagine this, every year there was a naval officer stationed at West Point as one of the, you know, professors. And there was an Army officer stationed at the Naval Academy at Annapolis as one of the professors. And it was tradition that the week of the Army Navy game, the Corps played a practical joke on the naval officer. And I'm sure the midshipman played a practical joke on the Army officer at Annapolis as well. I think my sophomore year, I believe that I wasn't involved because I was too involved with the football team. But I think it was my sophomore year, a group of upperclassmen broke into the naval officer's office in the middle of the night and took everything out and put it in the middle of a field that was covered in about 3 feet of snow and ran electricity out there so that the lamps worked and the phone worked and the typewriter worked or whatever he had. And so when he went to work the next day, he had to go to work at his office that was out in the middle of a field that had about 3 feet of snow on the ground. I believe my junior year, they went across the river to Poughkeepsie and bought like hundreds of live crabs. The the cadets called the midshipman crabs. as a sign of disrespect. So I think it was my junior year that they went over to Poughkeepsie and bought hundreds and hundreds of live crabs. And when the officer went to work the next morning, there were just hundreds of crabs crawling all over the place, in his desk drawers, in his cabinets, on his desk, on the floor, everywhere. So that's, you can imagine the level of kind of craziness that goes on that week. It is really just enormously important. So with the Army Navy game being played tomorrow, between probably, yeah, I would guess it's probably the best two teams fielded by Army and Navy in a long, long time. Army's actually ranked. They've only lost one game. Navy's really good too. Army should have a little bit of an edge, but um, you never know with these games because they're just played with such incredible passion. Um, so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out tomorrow between these two teams. Um, but anyway, I was the student manager, one of the student managers of the football team, which meant that I didn't have to march. I got great meals, and I got to travel with the team to away games. And we played Penn State, Notre Dame, Boston College, USC. I mean, it was pretty cool being part of the football team and being able to travel with it and eat wonderful, even more wonderful meals and not have to march. Anyway, the Wednesday of the Army Navy game, I was, at practice in that stadium behind me, which is way up on top of a mountain above West Point. About the time that we didn't have a practice stadium, we actually practiced in the game stadium. Um, that may have changed by now, but that was the case then. Um, on this day, about the time practice started, it started snowing. The conditions were just horrible. It was cold as hell. The wind was blowing, the snowing, sleeting. I mean, it was just miserable. But there was no where other place to practice, and it was the Army Navy game. You're not going to not practice the week of the Army Navy game, no matter what the conditions are. So I had the game plans, the defensive game plans in my hand because my assignment was to help the defensive coordinator during practice or games any way I could. And he called me out on the field to help me with a tip drill where he would pass the ball and I would tip it with another football to make it carry them off at a crazy angle, and the linebackers would attempt to intercept the ball. So I put the game plans down on the bench, that bench that you can see behind me. I think it was on the home side of the stadium. The game plans, it's a long time ago, so the game plans were just written on white glossy cardboard with magic markers. I don't think Sharpies had even been invented at that time. It's just magic markers, just handwritten on this glossy white cardboard with O-rings so that you could flip them. Anyway, I put them down on the bench and went out and helped the coach. Practice ended, took a shower, changed into my uniform. I think I had a sauna because it was really cold. One way to warm up. Went to dinner, went back to the barracks to my room. And about 8 o'clock that night, the defensive coordinator called me, said, "Mr. Hill, where are the defensive game plans? I can't find them." And I realized that I had set them down on the bench and never picked them up. And it had been snowing and snowing and snowing and snowing ever since. If I had lost the defensive game plans on Wednesday, the week of the Army Navy game, they would have tied rocks to my ankles and thrown me in the Hudson River. I mean, there is no way to even partially say what a what a nightmare that would have been. So it was after taps. So anyway, he said, "Well," I said, "I know where they are. I'll have them on your desk by the time you get to work tomorrow morning." Because I thought I knew where they were. I thought they were on that bench. Well, it was after taps, so we couldn't leave the barracks, my roommates and I. One of the great things about West Point is you and your roommates are a team. You support each other in everything that happens. So believe it or not, again, I promise I'm not making this story up. We did the Marx Brothers things. We tied our sheets together. Our room was on the third floor of the barracks, and we climbed out the window. Well, we put on every bit of warm clothing we had and climbed out the window and went up to the football stadium to try to find these game plans. I knew where they were, I thought. Well, they weren't there. So we spent at least an hour. It seemed like 10 hours. It was so miserable. It was so cold. The wind was blowing, it's sleeting, it was snowing. It was cold as hell. The wind was blowing hard. We spent it seemed like just hours and hours and hours, but we spent probably an hour and a half or so just shuffling around because there was so much snow. You know, you're just going to be lucky if you stumbled on them on the game plans, which were maybe 8 pieces of cardboard on an O-ring binder, just O-rings, not even a binder, just O-rings, and just shuffling around with our feet, hoping we kicked something and it would be the game plans. Anyway, we went up to we'd been up there an hour or so. This custodian came out and said, "What are you boys doing up here? You're not supposed to be up here at this time of night." And I told him. He said, "Oh, I found those. I've got them inside on my desk." So, oh my God, he saved my life. He had the game plans. So we took the game plans and we went back to the barracks. We climbed up our sheets that we tied together. Not making it up. I promise it's true. We Marx Brothers going up, Batman and Robin going up the side of the building with the sheets, and climbed in the window and remade our beds. Of course, boy, making your bed at West Point's a really big deal. They have to have the square corners. Um, and got some sleep, not a whole lot because it was really, really late by the time we got back. And when the rest of my company and the rest of the cadets marched to breakfast the next morning, I peeled off and went to the officer's office and put the game plans on his desk and then waited and went to class later. I didn't go. I had to skip breakfast that morning. So that's my story. And we lost. We lost the game. We lost the game. I did catch. I think I did actually. Oh, my assignment during the game was to attempt to catch the field goal attempts and extra point attempts by our kicker. And I think I actually caught 2 of them that day, which generally they would just hit the ground and I would go get them. Um, but we lost. We actually lost every year that I was at West Point, so it wasn't so much fun that a couple of weeks after it. But um, anyway, it was still an incredible experience being part of the team and traveling with the team and getting to know the players and being on the field during the games and helping the defensive coordinator or trying to catch the kicks. That's my story, the Army Navy game. I sure hope Army, for the sake of the plebes at West Point this year, I sure hope Army wins this tomorrow. It should be a really great game, and there is nothing like the Army Navy game. It is, young men who've dedicated their lives to the welfare of this country, who are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for what they believe in. They are definitely to be admired and respected. Um, and whoever wins, go Army. Thanks for tuning in to Adventures with Black Belt Sommelier.